So we threw AI into our policy a couple years ago. Did acceptable use program. Basically, we're going to use it like anything else. The AI is almost like the internet. Are you using it properly, ethically, and so forth? If you're not, and you're, using it for the wrong reasons, then there will be consequences of it. But we do not do an extensive policy outside of that, because ultimately it comes down to your ethics and so forth, and your character, what you're using it for, academic integrity. I've had teachers who now use it to say, Glenn has a learning disability. He says the child has a learning disability. These are the things that are in his or her IEP or 504 that they struggle with. What type of lesson plan would you create and how and why? And they did all that. And now you have a true differentiation for the first time. And now they're breaking it down and saying, all right, this is how this kid's going to work with me. This is how this kid's going to work with me. And that's the cool part. We've seen growth in these kids that we've never seen before.
So, hi, our fellow school leaders. I'm Avinash Bansal, co-founder at TomoClub. And today in our TomoClub podcast series, we have the Superintendent of Brigantine Board of Education, Glenn Robbins. He has recently published Calm in the Chaos, I Won't Back Down, kind of amazing books. And he has held so many leadership positions, so much so that he was a finalist for National Superintendent of the Year. I have read about his projects, about how he is mentoring other aspiring school leaders. So it's an absolute pleasure to have you here, Glenn, today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's my honor.
Absolutely. So yeah, today's topic is very interesting, AI in education. I think looking at your school overall strategy, I'm pretty sure we'll have a lot more actionable discussion and not just theoretical. So we want to go beyond and talk more the in-action picture of AI. And but before we go into that, I would love if you can, give us a snapshot about your journey in education.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks again for the kind intro. Really appreciate that. Maybe I could use you on a couple of events going forward to intro me.
Got it. You got me.
So I started off as a U.S. history teacher at a high school level. I was there for roughly about 5 years. I was also a varsity soccer coach during those years, and then moved on to being an assistant principal, same district. And then from there, I moved on to being the principal at a school right down the street, middle school, and enjoyed that for 4 years, and was very blessed to get a couple of different awards. The Student Voice Award from SATA, which is every tech committee in every state, nominated us for a student voice, and then was nominated for Samsung's Solved Problem. We were the New Jersey winner, and then I was able to receive the National Digital Principal of the Year. So it was quite a ride with that experience for 4 years, and then moved on to superintendency for 4 years, and then moved over to Brigantine. And in February will be 6 years. And during that 6 years, we've accomplished a lot of great things. Like you mentioned, I've had some blessings along the way of working with great people, great board, great city, that I was awarded, New Jersey Visionary Superintendent. I was awarded the Northeast Superintendent. And then, like you mentioned, the finalist for Superintendent of the Year. And I did get the AI Technology Superintendent of the Year last year. So, like I said, that's because I work with an amazing team, amazing people, and amazing students and parents. So, I'm just along for the ride, helping guide them. But I'm just very, very blessed in that regard.
I am honestly honored, and I love your journey. And yeah, it's always a team effort, no doubt, especially in K-12. So I want to understand, usually a small school system like Brigantine, how is it outperforming giants, who have a lot more budget, a lot more resources on both safety and innovation? How are you guys doing it?
I have a philosophy of team of teams. How are we going from complicated to complex? How are we truly going into the inner workings of leadership? So bigger districts and so forth, or organizations, there is an org chart, obviously, and it takes forever to get to the top person to have that conversation. Whereas I like to immerse myself in the actual field, being with the kids each and every day, being with the staff, constantly working with them. And my team is a great group of people who we have one vision, one mission, and understanding what we're trying to do. So we stay forward on that. And then we work extremely diligently on our culture. and our climate. And we strongly believe in what we're trying to do and making sure that our mission and our beliefs are followed through and are the same for our teachers, for our parents, for our kids, for our city council or board, whatever it may be. We work together as one. We put our egos to the side and say, what's best for the kids and how do we make this work with a very little to no budget? Compared to the bigger districts, by losing state aid money. So you have to be very frugal. You have to be very intentional on what you're trying to do. And then, like I said, it's all about that culture and climate to have the people around you help continue to rise up.
No, I agree with you, honestly, that sometimes I feel when you have limited budget, you would get more innovative in the way you spend it. And honestly, with AI, things have become much more commoditized in terms of, quicker you can get experimenting going, quicker you can get analysis. Like things which would take months can be now condensed within a weeks and within a day. So I think I would love to get into that part as well, that how AI has been helping you. But before that, I read a lot about how you believe in the Stoic principles. So can you give me an example of how you have consciously applied a Stoic principle to find calm in the chaos, and how has it changed the way you handle fear, politics, or setbacks?
That's a great question. Thank you for that. I think if you would have asked me this question 20, 30 years ago, my answer would be a little different. You know, understanding that the world is constantly looking for a reaction from you. And at the leadership level, everybody is watching that reaction. And I think we forget. And I think it goes back to Seneca talking about anger. Anger is worse than actual thing that hurts you to begin with. So if you get angry and start fighting back, there's one quote where it says it's like equivalent to punching at the wind. If I saw you punching at the wind angry, I'd be like, what's wrong with this guy? So to me, it's understanding that my reactions and everything I do have a consequence afterwards. If I react in anger, within 30 seconds of being angry, I could destroy 10 to 20 years of my career, and you see that. People who will put stuff on social media, people who will say things in an interview when they should have been calm, cool, and collective and really process that thinking. And lastly, I think about like Marcus Aurelius. He was the philosopher king. He was toward the end of the empire as it was starting to fall, but Marcus was the king of the empire, and he had lost more than a handful of children. When he first started, he had this massive flood that he had to sell off a lot of the things in his palace to be able to finance the government to keep it rolling. And then he had a plague going on. And then he had, which is where he was constantly burning incense to get rid of the smell of the plague. And then later he had one of his best friends, a general, try to raise a coup against him.
Yeah.
So it's sort of in leadership, so many things continue to happen, but your job as that leader is to continue to lead the right way for your people. You can't always have a great day, but you give 100% of your worst day, and realizing you can't take things personally. You have to understand that, you can be easy on others, but strict on yourself. And I think that's hard for people to do. People want to be hard on others and easy on themselves. I believe in hey, if something's not working out, then did I not truly lead the right way to help that person rise up into a problem? Is that problem mine? Because of responsibility. So I look at it from a bunch of different ways, but ultimately you need to be calm because every day is looking for a reaction from you. And God forbid you put out that wrong reaction, and then you lose so much that you work for.
No, I believe that the principle of Stoicism or these ideas is very logical. Any person in their sane mind would agree with it. But the hardest part is to internalize and comply with them in the time of need. It's the need when you
it's
forget.
It's easier said than done, right? It's much easier said than done.
Absolutely. How do you have developed, or how have you practiced that to be a part of your life? That is something that I really want to know.
Yeah. So for me, a lot of reading of the Stoics and trying to understand why they did certain things. Me also trying to understand like what is this teaching me? And I had to change my mindset a lot. I used a lot of their quotes and a lot of their philosophies on changing my mindset. Like I would get angry way too fast, and then I would look around and give a distant vision of myself looking down and go, "Ooh, was that the way I'm seeing it? How did the other people see it?" I've incorporated gratitude walks into my days and so forth. So if I'm out running or walking, I'm thinking of 3 to 5 things that are great that are going on and what I'm grateful for. I think that's helped shift the narrative. Um, Having mentors who
Mm.
have been through many things before to be able to talking point to your point, like you internalize things, you're reflecting, but are you sharing that and getting that valuable feedback back from people who may or may not have been through things, but they have a different field of life or a different view on life.
Yeah.
So for that, it really helps. And, one of the things I think about a lot because I'm right next to the ocean is one of the quotes where it's to paraphrase it, to be a stone that's unturned as the waves crash over it. So as
Mm.
you walk on the beach and you see a shell or you see a stone just sitting there and the waves are crashing on it and it barely moves, like, can that be you? And there's some days where the water just trickles in and it barely hits you. And then there's other days where we have a hurricane coming up the coast and the waves are getting bigger and bigger. So in life, that's a reality. That could be something going on in social media in your district. That could be a problem going in your district. That could be parents. It could be whatever.
Yeah.
Those waves are bigger, and you don't control those waves. So how you control, you're that little rock. You control yourself on how much you move. And there are some days you're going to take a pounding, and there's other days where it's going to be fine. But ultimately, you keep that internalized notion in there.
No, absolutely. I think we need to have a different podcast altogether on this topic because I have so many things to ask. But I'll keep it today towards about AI. But before again, would love to know about the Mr. Rogers program that you implemented. What was the thought? How did you pilot and how did you measure it? I think it might be very helpful for other school leaders listening to this.
Yeah, the Mr. Rogers Project. Thank you. Now, you did some homework, man. I appreciate that. That's one of the coolest projects that we came up with in a while. It was right after the pandemic was coming, the lockdown was ending. And, some of the businesses were starting to open back up. And I was still new to the district and I wanted to make it, cohesive with the chamber. So I went to the Chamber of Commerce with all the businesses and said, can I come to a dinner? Just introduce myself for the first time because some of you haven't seen me besides a computer screen. I'd like to say hello. I'd like to get involved. I want this kids to get involved because as a workforce, you're asking me to prepare the workforce. I need to know what you need,
Right.
and vice versa. So I went there and I said, look, I'm really looking to get involved. Number one, my kids want different food in the cafeteria. So anybody can help me out with that, I'm all in. My kids will be very interested in that. But secondly, how can we work together as a community to do something? Whether it's, I was like, our kids are great at social media. Our kids are wonderful at different things and they're a different client. So we came up with the Mr. Rogers Project, which was rather cool because it was a way to get to know their neighborhood. And the funny thing was, when you ask the kids today who Mr. Rogers is, not one kid can answer that, but their moms and dads and teachers can. So the Mr. Rogers Project is rather simple. It works with the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce does a membership fee. Depending on that tier, they're in the Mr. Rogers Project. Those businesses come into our school, all right, and pitch to the 8th graders, all right, Shark Tank style. This is my business. I'm an insurance company. I'm a surf shop. It's all small business. It's not like, giant conglomerates and so forth. And at the same time, they're going to talk about what are their hours? What do their social media pages look like? What's their clientele they're trying to get into? And the kids are hearing all these different things about this business because he or she may have never been there before.
Mm.
And then they have to take a little bit to restructure and revamp how their social media pages look like. So how does Facebook look like? New pages for Instagram. They're going to create a new Canva using AI, right? When they walk and a person walks into this business, there's a poster there. Where does that QR code take them? What is the message they're making for that business? At the same time, they've evolved a little bit. Since we're a shore community, a lot of people come down and read the local newspaper. So there, the kids' publications go into the newspaper as well. So it's trying to get the different clientele. But to back up, before all of that happens, the businesses come back and the kids give their pitch, their Shark Tank style. Now, each group will have like your business. We could do like you're talking about you and your business. You can have 5, 6, 7 kids just allotted to you, whereas my business has the same amount of kids, different kids, same number. But those kids never get to learn about yours and vice versa. So then we take them on a field trip to all the different businesses that come in. And usually it's like 4 or 5 businesses, and they go around. Some businesses give out swag. Some, if they're a restaurant or whatever, have the kids make food. A pizzeria had all the tables closed off and made all pizzas and so forth. So it's a great way there to get interactive with like seeing where these people really work, seeing what overhead costs may be, hearing about entrepreneurialism that it's not so easy. So it's a great give back. And they're also teaching them, hey, this is what we're looking for from our clientele when they come in to build the social media, but this is also what we're looking for a potential workforce. And it's been pretty cool. Here we have some 8th graders who are now working in some of these businesses now with architectural, like engineering. Some learned that, not everybody works in a shop. We went to a couple houses and, and those business owners say, hey, I'm saving on overhead here. Do you understand? Like, I don't have to pay additional electric, no mortgage, no anything on top of, what I have in my household. And so the cool part is, like I said, they revamp all the social medias. The businesses get a new clientele. And the cool part about this too is, it's a great PR.
Yeah.
Great PR. So now they can't say, I don't know what's going on in that school. We have businesses who have no kids in our school who know what's going on. So when people come in and they're like, hey, how's the area? How's the school? They'll talk about, hey, this kid designed this or this kid did that. And this is what they're doing over there. So it's like a win-win-win for the kid, for the business, and the district.
This is insane, honestly, doing it for middle school kids. And I can't even imagine the amount of steep learning that they must have got about so many operations that goes in that business, because it's sometimes sad. Like when you talk to even a college grad, they don't know how the world works. And you're talking about explaining that to a middle school kid. And I think if I have to explain my business to a 7th grader, and if I can actually make them understand it, then only I would say I really know it. So sometimes, right? If I can't explain it to a middle school kid, that means I am doing something that's not right.
So. Yeah, and it's kind of one of the coolest things besides the jobs that have come for these kids and so forth, and the families being excited about that, is the business owners more and more recently have been telling me that our kids email them and text them because they share information so they can ask questions during this project, like what are you looking for and so forth, with their boss, And these businesses are telling me these kids are better at emailing and texting than their own employees. Like they're writing, dear Mr. Robbins, I was looking at this. How can we work on this? And I see that when they email me with ideas. So to your point, even though you're sharing your story and you're trying to think of like, how would I sell this to like a 7th and 8th grader? The 7th and 8th grader are thinking back to you, like, how do I sell back to this adult who, I don't know much about him, and how do I make it work? So that's a cool complex to be able to do that in 8th grade. The soft skills and the complexity of understanding and how to talk to individuals, that's something I'm really excited about.
No, I can't agree with you more. This is insane. Congratulations, and I really hope other school leaders can also take this initiative. It's not easy. It needs a lot of head down work on it, but I'm glad you could pull it off. So is it like a ongoing project? Like, do you have set up some processes in which there is a continuous engagement between the small businesses and students, or was it a one-of-a-kind thing?
It's every marking period. Okay. So it's an elective class that rotates. It got so popular. We have a cybersecurity/AI class. We've had that for 3 years as one of the electives. We've had to add it into that class too, because the businesses want to get in. At one point, we had a 26 business waiting list last year, for these businesses. Right. So that's the cool part about this, is that they want to be here. And these businesses, like I said, the chamber sets it all up for us. They'll tell us, hey, these are the 4 or 5 that are coming in this marking period. So set it up. So it continues to evolve. But like I said, the cool part about it, it's even though when it's done, the kids now know they can go to these businesses and they know the owners or they know the managers, so it's more, once again, building that collaborative, getting to know the neighborhood. We do that with our police and fire. We've done that with our lifeguard, but now we're doing that with business owners where kids feel comfortable enough to have a conversation. And like I said, we have a couple of kids who left 8th grade and are now working for them. You
Hmm.
know, people, you got to wait a couple of years before you can do that, you know?
Yeah, no,
So,
actually. So I'm glad it's thriving. It's because a lot of people pull it once or twice, but then it kind of dies out because of
yeah.
because it doesn't feel valuable for the businesses mostly, and sometimes students also lose interest. But I'm so happy that you made it a process in a way that it's evolving and it's all automatically becoming a part of the curriculum. Um,
Yeah.
so now understanding about the rapid change in technology, right? Uh, what do you believe is the fundamental purpose of public education in 2025 look like? Because you have worked with federal policymakers to local veteran groups. Um, so what do those conversations reveal about the future of public schools in America?
That's a great question, right? And we're at a really crazy crossroad right now, depending on what state or what federal program you're following. But to me, it's always about what's the experience you're trying to create for these kids. You
Hmm.
know, truly, people talk about, um, it's education. Are we preparing them for the future? That's always been like the thing. We're
Yeah.
21st century, 22nd century. And I saw a stat the other day, and I want this to hit home to the listeners here. This year's kindergarten class will graduate high school in 2038.
Hmm.
Okay, 2038 when this kindergarten class coming in will graduate high school. They'll retire from working in 2087.
Yeah.
Right? What year are we in? And they're going to retire in 2087. So are we preparing them for their world or ours? And
Yeah.
that's why I use those numbers because I think it hits home a little bit harder because we are so narrow sighted on now that we forget the exponential time to change so fast right now with all the things you mentioned. But there's a long term plan. These kids are going to be working with teammates that are virtual. They already are.
Yeah.
They're not human beings. How are we preparing them for that? I know there's a rift between screen time and cell phones and AI and all this other stuff. But my question is this: if in your business, do your employees use cell phones?
Oh, absolutely, all the time.
Right. Okay. So there we go. But yet in schools, we're going to take them away.
Hmm.
All right. And I understand that the lower levels or the high school levels, but here's my point. You should be able to have the teacher to have freedom and autonomy to use the cell phone for a lesson if they need it. All
Hmm.
right. And let's talk about the school district who do not have the finances to continue to disdain Chromebooks or laptops or whatever programs they have. Now, are you giving a disservice to those families that can't send in a device?
Hmm.
I understand there's a thing, but I think when you take away the autonomy and trust from an educator, it it's kind of like a double-sided sword. And I know we can argue this one way or the other,
I know.
but if we're preparing these kids for a workforce that retires in 2087, they're going to be using technological devices. They're going to be using AI. We have schools, I was just presenting at Google back in April, May. And I remember we said, all right, we're going to talk about AI in schools. And half the room, these leaders, over 100 plus leaders, were like, we don't have a policy yet. We don't use AI.
Hmm.
OpenAI has been out for a couple of years now for the public to consume, even though it's been out for years.
Yeah.
But ChatGPT blew it up a couple of years ago and now it's evolved into how many different programmings. But yeah, here we are in 2025 where some schools are like, well, we're not sure if this is going to last. That's
Hmm.
like it's there. It's not going to go away, and it's continuing to evolve so fast, so much that if we're not giving our staff the ability to try to use this and or demonstrate it with the kids and vice versa, we're doing a disservice to them. We're teaching them backwards instead of forward. And ultimately, here's something that's never going to go away: critical thinking skills.
Right.
Right? Teaching the kids, like when the AI gives you an answer, it's, the old equation of like my grandfather would say, do you believe everything you read in the newspaper? Same
Hmm.
thing now. You believe everything you read on social media or a news publication. You
Yeah.
can't, but you can question it. And if you can question why, how, where, and when, multiple times to get that answer, then maybe you can trust it.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying be like that crazy conspiracy theory where you do your own research, but I'm saying as you put questioning into kids of, why does this happen?
Mm.
Why did this decision get made and how could it have been better? Why would I have done if I was in that position? That deeper inquiry thinking will never go away. The collaborative thinking of teamwork will never go away. But ultimately, we need to prepare them for the future of tomorrow instead of going back to, this is what's comfortable for me to teach. This is how I've always done it this way. And my lesson plans haven't changed.
This is amazing because I was yesterday having a conversation with the school leader, and the topic was around student engagement. And the first thing that they are not anti-AI. They have AI program now, but they are still going against cell phones because they think that that's reducing the student engagement, what they would want. So one thing that I've understood after talking to so many school leaders is that they tend to listen, and they should listen more to the community that they're serving, rather than having. I should not have opinions in a way what's right, what's wrong. I have to listen to the audience, right? So, and you're absolutely right. Your point of view that the future of employees is very different. Right now, I have a AI employee in my company who does in prospecting of schools for me, who identifies what school is going to be relevant for us, for our programs, find us a referral, get us introduction, and try to set up a meeting.
That's awesome.
That's a major job of an employee. Yeah.
Yeah. So think about that for a second. Our kids in 5th to 8th grade, it's more the 7th and 8th graders, use AI for a very similar reason. Because they might get who you are and they want to interview somebody and they'll say, how do I contact this person? What questions can I ask this person? Because I know of them, but I don't know everything of them.
Yeah.
Right. And we're teaching them that in 7th and 8th grade. Actually, they're teaching us because that's an ungraded class period time for this podcasting. And these kids are doing that. Now, don't get me wrong. They know some people that they want to interview and they know like everything about them, like fangirl moment kind of a deal. But when they've interviewed Olympians, they've interviewed Super Bowl champions, they've interviewed, professional players, they've interviewed people who work for organizations and so forth, they don't know everything about them. They're kids, right? So the fact that they're using, like you are using it for that product, they're using it for their own product at such a younger level. So if they're doing it now in 7th and 8th grade, what are they going to be doing when they get to you in a couple more years? And what are you going to be asking of them then?
Yeah. I think my nephew and my nieces, they're much more comfortable talking to an AI through Siri or through Alexa than me. I cannot think what should I talk to them, but it comes natural to them, no doubt. So
yes.
Now coming to, can you explain me your school AI strategy and also what it looks like from a curriculum scope, age appropriate use, and teacher workload?
So we threw AI into our policy a couple of years ago. Did acceptable use program. Basically, we're going to use it like anything else. The AI is almost like the internet. Are you using it properly, ethically, and so forth? If you're not, and you're, using it for the wrong reasons, then there will be consequences of it. But we do not do an extensive policy outside of that, because ultimately it comes down to your ethics and so forth, and your character, what you're using it for, academic integrity. So we use it for, like I said earlier, we have a class that we have cybersecurity for the last 3 years. AI is joined on there for the last 2 years with that in the 8th grade. And that's talking about all the particulars that we kind of talked about earlier. Our teachers, when ChatGPT first came out and then evolved into how many different things, I kept saying to them, try these things out, see how it is. Now, obviously, don't put in my information, don't put in the birthdays and all the other important information that should never go out there. But, I've had teachers who now use it to say, Glenn has a learning disability. He says the child has a learning disability. These are the things that are in his or her IEP or 504 that they struggle with. What type of lesson plan would you create and how and why? And they did all that. And now you have a true differentiation for the first time. And now they're breaking it down and saying, all right, this is how this kid's going to work with me. This is how this kid's going to work with me. And that's the cool part. We've seen growth in these kids that we've never seen before. And I'm not saying that those answers are the be all end all. Our teachers had to tweak the answers and so forth because it's not all apples to apples and oranges to oranges. But
Yeah.
they were able to utilize that to truly lift and elevate a level that they might have not thought about before. Whether it's cognitive bias or disconformity, whatever it may be, this gives a whole different idea for them to move forward. We have seventh and eighth grade teachers in the ELA that were using it as like, hey, type in your letter or whatever your essay is, and now we're going to edit it. And I
Mm.
want you to put it in. That's going to be your editor. Do you like the remarks that came back? Do you see any hallucinations? Do you see any biases? Do you see anything that stands out to you that shouldn't be right? So that goes into that deeper questioning that I mentioned earlier, like the inquiry. We tie it into like, all right, you wrote an essay. Now, create it into a video using AI. And the video comes back. Do we like it? How do you edit that? And then the kids showcase that. And we've had some really cool conversations in the last year where kids are like, yeah, this looks, in third grade, like they wrote little essays about like their family and what they like to do. And then they get a video that comes back or a picture, and they're like, this looks nothing like me and my family. They're like, this came back all white. And my family were African American. So they have those conversations, like what can be different and so forth. So we tie it into that. And then let's be honest, like we've been using AI for a while. We just don't realize it. When you do the 100 days of school, right, and the kids dress up as old people, how many apps are out there where you can, do a picture of a person and it turns them into an old person?
Yeah.
So there's so many fun ways about that. Recently, I have a 5-year-old daughter, and recently Gemini came out with their storybook.
Yeah.
I took her picture, I sent it to her, and she freaked out. She thought it was the greatest thing. She must have watched it at least 10 times in 20 minutes, and listened to her book. And then I took a picture of her and her best friend that went to the amusement park, typed it in, and send that back to her. And my wife's like, she is having a field day over here right now. So my point is, for this upcoming year, how does that work for like kindergarten kids that write or draw a picture? And how does that advance for them? This is now. And this is like the Commodore 64 or the Atari for these kids. Like this is the
Yeah.
worst of the worst. Like there's some pretty cool things that are coming out. But if we can teach them how to use it ethically and morally with integrity, you know, then I think we can advance our future forward. But if we just ignore it, don't have any policies and say maybe this will pass, the kids will learn it on their own. And are they truly learning what they should be learning? So I'd rather have us trying to model the way than just ignoring it.
No, agreed, absolutely. And I cannot imagine the applications that they're going to build on top of it, like the way we are considering web, like internet, as an obvious thing. So we built so many applications over the last few years. So can you name me 3 tasks AI right now has been used by the staff? And do you have any quantification of how much time they're saving, and have you verified it?
Great question. We teamed up with Brisk Teaching last year. Brisk has been wonderful for us. And yes, they do break it down. They show every single user. So for me, from a financial aspect and a leadership aspect, I can see that it's a good returning investment or not. So Brisk has been great for us. It's really helped the teachers, and they say that, I have an assistant now. This has helped speeding up my time and so forth. Obviously, Chat GPT was one that, that's kind of evolved. Claude, some people use Claude, but for the district, it's mostly Brisk and Gemini. And I'm excited to see how that's going to work now because all the kids will have Notebook LM built into their users because we're a Google school. So I'm intrigued to see that. And our teachers have been using it. This was the cool part. A lot of our teachers continue to do their education, right? For an extra certification or their master's or their doctorate. And when I was showing them, Notebook LM when it came out a year ago, and they're like, my professors are drowning me in like these books that are like this thick, and I got to have all these lesson plans done, and I'm trying to do this on top of that. And I'm like, have you done the podcast version yet? And this is before the interactive part and before the videos that came out for it. And they came back a couple of weeks later, a couple of them like, this has saved me so much time. I can listen in the car. I know what I'm talking about before I get there. And now I have a life again. So to me, I like seeing that and hearing those, it's quantitative and qualitative data in a way for me.
No, I agreed. Absolutely. And also there's a lot of, there's a what do you call a belief system there's a bias that students are going to use AI is going to make them lazy, or they will simply outsource their learning. But what's the ground reality look like? Are the students actually using it to get away just for cheating, or are they using it effectively for the benefit? What has been your experience on that?
I think my experience would be, is the assignment or project really of significance that AI could answer that question for you?
Wow.
You know, could we do something a little more detailed?
Hmm.
You know, look, I was a history teacher and I grew up, you know, I was told you had to memorize these dates because you'll never have anything to be able to tell you. Now, like you said earlier, the kids just walk up to Alexa and I say, ask a question. Like it's, you know, my son does that to me all the time. He's like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm going to ask Alexa. I'm like, okay. You know, you don't need that anymore. But I think it's a deeper complexity of the questioning, like, what are we using production wise for these kids, assessment wise? Is it deeper thinking that allows them that they can't always use AI? And I think it's fun or unique that we continue to have these conversations. Like I said, when a teacher says, put this in and let's see the video that it generates, and it's a completely different race. And or when it gets back an editorial remark based on an essay, and it's completely something that the kid did not have in mind. If we can continue to push them, ask why 5 times or how 5 times. I think that's where we can continue to grow them to be deeper thinkers. If we just say, accept it what is and move on,
Hmm.
then I think we're missing a valuable point. You know, one of the funniest things that I had happen to me as a parent, I have a 13-year-old son, and last year he had a take-home test. And I said, buddy, get it done. And a couple of days, end of the year, he's like, get it done, get it done. I'll get it, Dad, I'll get it. And then a week later, he texts me while I'm downstairs and he goes, I'm never trusting AI again.
Okay.
I said, oh, I know what you did. And he goes, yeah, I asked it to answer questions for me on my particular project, and it gave me the wrong answers.
Hmm.
And number one, I was infuriated because I told him to work on it all this time. He knew the answers, but he got lazy, right? And his mom is also a teacher in that field, so she could have helped him. So that didn't go over too well with mom. But I was happy
Hmm.
and laughed because now he knows he has to question it.
Right.
Every time he gets something back on an AI or the internet or whatever, he's going to be questioning now, is that really the truth? You know, should I look into this a little bit more? So as a father, I was kind of excited about that. And I shared that with him. And too, you know, that when I was writing my book, I was looking for different quotes. And, you know, the one book I wanted the Brene Brown quote in there. And I thought I found this beautiful quote online. I thought it was great. It really resonated with what I wanted to do. And I typed it in. My editor's like, I don't think this is her quote. So I was like, all right, and I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna research. And I found it. It's like, yeah, you go on ChatGPT. It said it's on this page, this book. And I'm like, there it is. And I Googled it and I found it a couple more times. And I'm like, there it is. And she's like, no. So I put it in, I found the book on a PDF. I put it in a notebook LM because obviously that just goes down to what that particular book was. I said, give me all the quotes listed and find this quote for me. And what page is it on? Is it on page 87? And they go, no, it's not on page 87. These are all the quotes. So
Hmm.
it's like, you know, it's like that meme where like Abraham Lincoln's on like the quote says, I trust everything on the internet. You know, like it was for me, I was relating that story to Henry, my son. I
Right.
was like, Henry, you hit that with this problem, I hit this with mine. And it reiterates the fact that we have to continue to look and dive deeper. And that's something I pushed onto my staff. And I share that story openly, you know, because it's a learning point for us to continue to question.
No, I love that. I think that's a beautiful end to our discussion in a way that the learning won't stop. You might have
Mhm.
better research tools, you have better assistance, but the learning will continue to grow and is going to be relevant more than ever. So honestly, thank you so much, Glenn. I think you guys have some really genuine on ground policies, as well as not even policies, implementation happening right now around AI. And that's why you are one of the AI innovators of the country. And let's continue our conversation. But thank you so much for giving us time today.
Yeah, I would definitely like to continue this conversation. We could go into a lot deeper things, my friend. I really
I
appreciate
know.
the time and effort. And thank you so much again for having me here. I really do appreciate it.
Perfect. Thank you so much.